When I showed up at their family reunion, driving a Rolls-Royce, wearing diamonds, and with my own security team, his mother nearly choked on her champagne. She thought destroying my life 3 years ago would keep me away from her precious son forever. She was dead wrong. Y'all, before I tell you this wild story about how I went from being the girl they tried to break to the woman who broke their whole family dynasty, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, this story has more twists than a soap opera. Now let me tell you how I turned their own game against them. You know, they say love is blind, but honey, it ain't stupid. At least, I thought it wasn't until I met Gabriel Wellington. I was working as a chef at this upscale restaurant downtown, putting my heart and soul into every dish that left my kitchen. Cooking wasn't just my job. It was my passion, my art, my way of showing love to the world. My grandmother always said I had magic in my hands when it came to food, and every night I proved her right. That Tuesday evening started like any other. The dinner rush was in full swing, and I was orchestrating my kitchen like a symphony conductor. Then, our head waiter came rushing back, talking about this customer who wanted to personally thank the chef for the most incredible meal he'd ever had. Now, I'd heard compliments before, but something about the way he said it made me curious. So I wiped my hands, straightened my chef's coat, and walked out to table 12. And there he was, Gabriel, tall, handsome, with these warm brown eyes that seemed to light up when he saw me. He stood up immediately, this genuine smile spreading across his face, and I swear the whole restaurant just faded away. "Are you the artist behind that masterpiece?" he asked, gesturing to his empty plate. The way he said it, with such respect and admiration, made my heart skip a beat. We talked for 20 minutes, right there in the dining room, and I felt something I'd never felt before. Like I'd found a piece of myself I didn't even know was missing. Gabriel started coming to the restaurant every week, always requesting my special dishes, always finding reasons to talk to me after service. He was different from any man I'd ever met, educated, well-spoken, but not arrogant about it. He asked about my dreams, my recipes, my family. He listened when I told him about growing up with my grandmother after my parents died, about working 3 jobs to put myself through culinary school, about my dream of opening my own restaurant someday. For 6 months, we fell into this beautiful routine. He'd come for dinner, we'd talk until the restaurant closed, and then we'd walk around the city for hours, just talking about everything and nothing. He never pressured me, never made me feel like I owed him anything. He was just present, available, real. I started looking forward to Tuesdays, like a kid looks forward to Christmas morning. But Gabriel had secrets, and I was about to find out just how big they were. One evening, instead of his usual table, he asked me to dinner at his place. I said yes, thinking he lived in some nice apartment downtown. Child, when that black car pulled up to pick me up, I knew something was different. When we drove through those massive iron gates, and up that winding driveway to what looked like a palace, my mouth fell open. "Gabriel," I said, staring at this mansion that belonged in magazines, "what exactly do you do for work?" He took my hand and looked me straight in the eyes. "Aaliyah, I should have told you sooner. My family, we own Wellington Industries. I'm not just Gabriel, I'm Gabriel Wellington." The name hit me like a truck. Wellington Industries, the billionaire family, the ones you see on Forbes lists and charity galas. My sweet, humble Gabriel, who ate my cooking every Tuesday and walked with me through city parks, was one of the richest men in the country. I won't lie, I was overwhelmed. Part of me wanted to run, to protect myself from a world I didn't understand. But when he cupped my face in his hands and said, "You're still the same amazing woman who made me fall in love with her cooking and her heart," I decided to trust what we had built together. Love doesn't ask for bank statements, right? That's when Gabriel told me he wanted me to meet his family. "They're going to love you," he said with such confidence. How could they not? Oh, sweet Gabriel. If only he had known what was coming. The Wellington estate was even more intimidating in daylight. As we walked up those marble steps to the front door, I held Gabriel's hand tight and reminded myself that I belonged there because he wanted me there. The butler, they actually had a butler, led us into this grand dining room, with a table so long you could probably land a plane on it. Then she walked in, Beatrice Wellington, Gabriel's mother. Picture the most elegant woman you've ever seen. Then multiply that by 10, and add a layer of ice that could freeze hell over. She glided into that room, wearing pearls that probably cost more than my entire life. Her silver hair perfectly styled, her blue eyes scanning me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. "So," she said, her voice as smooth as silk and twice as dangerous, "you must be the cook that Gabriel has been telling us about." The way she said cook made it sound like a disease. Gabriel immediately corrected her. "Chef, mother. Aaliyah is a talented chef." But the damage was done. I could see it in her eyes. I wasn't a person to her. I was a problem to be solved. Dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Every question was a trap. Every compliment had thorns. "How fascinating that you work with your hands," she'd say, while making sure I noticed her manicured nails had never seen a day of real work. "And you learned to cook from your grandmother. How rustic." When Gabriel talked about my culinary achievements, she'd smile and change the subject to people I'd never heard of and places I'd never been. But the worst part wasn't Beatrice's cold hostility. It was watching Gabriel slowly shrink throughout the evening. This confident, loving man I knew started apologizing for things that didn't need apologies, started speaking differently, started becoming someone I didn't recognize. By the time we left, I felt like I'd been in a war zone, and I wasn't sure we'd both made it out alive. Gabriel sensed something was wrong during the car ride home. "They just need time to get to know you," he kept saying. "My mother can be protective." Protective, that's what he called it. I called it something else entirely. But I kept my mouth shut because I loved him, and I wanted to believe that love could conquer anything. Boy, was I wrong. Over the next few months, Beatrice Wellington launched a campaign against me that would have impressed military generals. It started small. Gabriel would mention plans we'd made, only to suddenly remember family obligations that coincidentally happened at the same time. Phone calls would interrupt our dates, always from his mother, always urgent, always requiring him to leave immediately. Then things got more personal. I started noticing people following me, not obviously, but I grew up in neighborhoods where you learn to watch your back, and I knew when I was being watched. My restaurant manager mentioned that some people had been asking questions about me, about my family, my background, my finances. When I told Gabriel, he laughed it off. "Mother's just being thorough," he said. "She does background checks on everyone in our circle, everyone in their circle." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. The real attack came through the people I loved most. Beatrice had done her homework and discovered that my father had filed for bankruptcy when I was 15. It was during my mother's cancer treatment, and even with insurance, the medical bills had destroyed our family financially. It was the most painful period of my life, watching my parents lose everything while trying to save my mother's life. She died anyway, and my father never recovered from either loss. But to Beatrice Wellington, our family tragedy was ammunition. She had investigators dig up every detail, every missed payment, every foreclosure notice, every desperate attempt my father had made to keep our heads above water while watching his wife die. Then she weaponized it. The confrontation happened at Gabriel's apartment. I walked in to find him sitting at his kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of him, his face pale and confused. "Aaliyah," he said without looking up, "we need to talk." My heart dropped to my stomach. Those papers contained my entire family's financial history, medical records from my mother's treatment, even report cards from when I was struggling in school because I was working part-time jobs to help with expenses. Someone had invaded every private moment of my family's pain and laid it out like evidence in a trial. "My mother thinks you might be using me," Gabriel said, and the words hit me like physical blows. She says there are patterns, that you targeted me specifically because of my family's wealth. He finally looked up, and I saw doubt in his eyes for the first time since we'd met. She says your whole story about being a chef, about your dreams, it's all an act to get close to our money. I stood there, speechless, watching the man I loved question everything we'd built together based on his mother's poison. Gabriel, I finally whispered, you know me. You've seen my heart. You've been to my grandmother's house, met my friends, eaten my food made with love. How can you even ask me this? But the doubt was already there, planted and watered by his mother's careful manipulation. I don't know what to believe anymore, he said, and those words shattered something inside me that I didn't think could be fixed. The family intervention came 3 days later. Gabriel called and asked me to come to the estate because his family wanted to talk to me. I should have known it was a trap, but I still believed in the power of truth and love. I dressed carefully, wore my grandmother's pearl earrings for strength, and walked into that mansion ready to fight for what Gabriel and I had. The whole family was there: Beatrice, his father William, his sister Caroline, sitting in their elegant living room like judges at a trial. Gabriel looked miserable, sitting apart from everyone, unable to meet my eyes. Beatrice gestured to a chair, positioned directly across from all of them, like I was about to be interrogated. Aaliyah, Beatrice began, her voice as smooth as ever. We've become aware of certain discrepancies in your background. She opened a folder and began reading from it like she was presenting evidence. My father's bankruptcy, my family's medical bills, even details about my grandmother's modest pension and the small house I grew up in. We're not cruel people, she continued, but we must protect our family's interests. Gabriel has a responsibility to maintain certain standards, to marry within appropriate circles. The word marry made Gabriel flinch, and I realized they'd been discussing our future without me in it. Then came the ultimatum. William Wellington, who had barely spoken to me during our previous encounters, leaned forward with a checkbook in his hands. We're prepared to offer you compensation for your time with our son, he said, like I was an employee being terminated. $100,000 plus a confidentiality agreement. You leave Gabriel alone, you don't contact our family again, and you never speak publicly about your relationship. The room went silent. I looked at Gabriel, praying he would stand up, defend what we had, choose love over money and family pressure. Instead, he sat there, staring at his hands, saying nothing. The silence stretched until it became an answer itself. And if I refuse? I asked, though I already knew. Beatrice smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. Then we'll make your life very uncomfortable. Your restaurant will lose customers. Your reputation in the culinary world will suffer. We have influence in many places, Aaliyah. It would be unfortunate if doors started closing for you. I stood up, my legs shaky, but my voice strong. Keep your money, I said. And Gabriel, I finally looked at him, memorizing his face one last time. I hope you find what you're looking for in your mother's world, because what we had was real, and you're throwing it away for people who measure love in dollars and social status. I walked out of that mansion with my head high, but I fell apart as soon as I got home. For days, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't even look at my kitchen without remembering Gabriel's face when he tasted my food for the first time. I'd lost more than a boyfriend. I'd lost my faith in love itself. But Beatrice Wellington wasn't done with me yet. Within a week, my life started falling apart in ways I never could have imagined. Food critics, who had previously praised my work, suddenly published scathing reviews. Suppliers I'd worked with for years began canceling contracts. The restaurant owner, under pressure from mysterious complaints and threats of bad publicity, had no choice but to let me go. Then my grandmother got sick. The stress of watching me suffer, combined with her age and existing health problems, sent her to the hospital. As I sat beside her bed, holding her frail hand, she looked at me with eyes that had seen 90 years of joy and pain. "Baby girl," she whispered, Sometimes the Lord lets us fall so we can learn how to fly. Don't let them break your spirit. You got fire in you, just like your mama did. Use it. She passed away 2 weeks later, and I felt like I'd lost the last person in the world who truly believed in me. At the funeral, I noticed a black car parked across the street, watching. Even in my grief, Beatrice Wellington was making sure I knew I was being monitored. That's when something inside me snapped, not broke, snapped into place. I realized that I had two choices. I could let these people destroy me, or I could rise up and show them what happens when you underestimate a woman with nothing left to lose. I took my grandmother's insurance money and the small inheritance she left me, and I disappeared for 6 months. Not physically, I moved to another city, but spiritually and emotionally, I went underground. I used that time to learn everything I could about the Wellington family business. I discovered things that would have made Gabriel's head spin. Wellington Industries wasn't just successful. It was built on a foundation of fraud, exploitation, and illegal business practices going back generations. William Wellington had inherited a company that made its fortune through government contracts obtained through bribery. Beatrice had covered up safety violations that resulted in worker injuries. They had destroyed small businesses, manipulated stock prices, and used their influence to silence anyone who tried to expose them. But the most shocking discovery was that I wasn't the first woman Beatrice had destroyed. Over the years, she had systematically ruined the lives of any woman who got too close to Gabriel or posed a threat to the family's social standing. There was Jennifer, a teacher who had dated Gabriel in college, now working at a gas station after her career was mysteriously sabotaged. There was Angela, a lawyer who had gotten engaged to Gabriel 5 years ago, now struggling with mental health issues after being publicly humiliated and professionally blacklisted. I found them. I found all of them. And slowly, carefully, I began building a network of women who had been wronged by the Wellington family. We shared information, resources, and most importantly, evidence. While I was building my case, I was also building myself back up. I used my grandmother's recipes and my culinary skills to start a catering business, targeting high-end clients who appreciated authentic, soulful food. Word spread quickly about this mysterious chef who could transform any event with her incredible cuisine. I didn't use my real name at first. I called myself Chef Amara, but my reputation grew faster than I could have imagined. Within 18 months, I was catering for celebrities, politicians, and business moguls. I was making more money than I'd ever dreamed of. But more importantly, I was building connections with powerful people who had their own reasons to dislike the Wellington family. The breakthrough came when I was catering a private dinner for a federal judge who was investigating corporate fraud cases. During the event, he mentioned his frustration with families like the Wellingtons, who seemed untouchable despite their obvious corruption. I didn't say anything that night, but the next day, I made a phone call that would change everything. I provided the judge with evidence that linked the Wellington family to decades of illegal activities, financial records, witness testimonies from former employees, documentation of bribes, and cover-ups. Everything I and the other women had gathered over 2 years of careful investigation. The FBI raid on Wellington Industries happened on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 years after Gabriel and I had our first conversation at the restaurant. I watched the news coverage from my apartment, seeing agents carrying boxes of evidence out of their corporate headquarters, while reporters speculated about the charges. But I wasn't done yet. The legal case would take time, and I wanted them to understand who was behind their downfall. So I planned something that would shake them to their core. The Wellington family held an annual charity gala every summer at their estate. It was their chance to show off their wealth and social status while pretending to care about causes they'd never truly supported. This year, I bought a table at their auction. I arrived in a car that cost more than most people's houses, wearing a dress that had been featured in fashion magazines, with diamonds around my neck that caught the light like stars. But the most important thing I wore was confidence. the kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're capable of. The reaction when I walked into that ballroom was everything I'd hoped for. Conversations stopped, people stared, and when Beatrice Wellington saw me, her champagne glass actually trembled in her hand. I didn't hide in the corner. I worked that room like I owned it, which, in a way, I did. I talked to their friends about my successful catering business. I discussed investment opportunities with their business partners. I made it clear that I wasn't the broken woman they'd tried to destroy. I was something much more dangerous. When Gabriel saw me, he literally stopped walking and stared. I could see the confusion in his eyes, the questions he wanted to ask, the regret he was trying to hide. But I didn't go to him. I let him come to me. "Aaliyah," he said when he finally worked up the courage to approach me. "You look incredible. What are you doing here?" I smiled the same smile his mother had used on me years earlier, elegant and cold. "I'm here for the auction, Gabriel. I heard there might be some interesting properties available soon." Before he could ask what I meant, the evening's entertainment began. The auctioneer announced that due to recent legal complications, the Wellington family was liquidating several assets, including the estate we were standing in. I raised my paddle and bid on everything. The art collection, the vintage cars, and finally, the house itself, the mansion, where I'd been humiliated and dismissed, where I'd been told I wasn't good enough for their son. When my final bid was accepted, and I became the new owner of the Wellington estate, the silence in that room was deafening. Beatrice looked like she was going to faint. William's face went completely white, and Gabriel just stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. I stood up, accepted the congratulations of the auctioneer, and then did something that felt better than any revenge I could have planned. I announced that the estate would be converted into a transitional housing facility for women escaping abusive relationships and for those who had been economically displaced by corporate greed. "Some of us," I said, looking directly at Beatrice, "know what it's like to be torn down by people who think they're better than us. This house will be a place where women can rebuild their lives and remember their worth." The applause that followed was genuine and warm, completely different from the polite clapping that had greeted the Wellington family's speeches earlier in the evening. As I was leaving, Gabriel caught up with me in the parking lot. "Aaliyah, please, can we talk? I know I made mistakes, but I never stopped thinking about you. When I found out what my mother really did, how she manipulated everything." I turned to face him, and for a moment, I saw the man I used to love. But I also saw the man who had chosen his family's money over our relationship, who had doubted my love based on lies and manipulation. "Gabriel," I said gently, "you didn't just make mistakes. You made choices. When your family attacked me, you could have stood up for what we had. When they tried to buy me off like I was a problem to be solved, you could have fought for us. Instead, you sat there and let them destroy the best thing that ever happened to either of us." He tried to argue, to explain, to make excuses, but I held up my hand. "I forgive you," I said, and I meant it. "Forgiveness isn't for you, it's for me. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going backward." 3 months later, the Wellington family trials began. Beatrice was convicted on multiple counts of fraud, bribery, and racketeering. William received a similar sentence. Their assets were seized, their company dissolved, and their name became synonymous with corporate corruption rather than success. Gabriel lost everything too, though he wasn't criminally charged. His trust fund was frozen, his social status disappeared overnight, and he had to learn how to live in the real world for the first time in his privileged life. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd gotten a job as a sales associate at a car dealership, that he'd moved into a modest apartment, that he was trying to rebuild his life from scratch. Part of me felt sorry for him, but a bigger part of me knew that maybe this was what he needed to become the man he was supposed to be. As for me, I kept my promise about the estate, the Aaliyah Wellington Foundation, Yes, I kept my maiden name, but added his for the irony. Opened its doors 6 months after the auction. We've helped over 200 women transition from situations of abuse, poverty, and economic manipulation to lives of independence and dignity. My catering business grew into a restaurant empire. I now own 5 restaurants across 3 cities, each one employing women who need second chances and serving food that celebrates the cultural diversity Beatrice Wellington spent so much energy trying to suppress. Sometimes people ask me if I think I went too far, if I should have just moved on and let karma handle the Wellington family. But here's what I learned from that whole experience. Karma isn't some mystical force that automatically balances the scales. Sometimes karma needs an assist. Sometimes justice requires someone to stand up and fight back. I didn't destroy the Wellington family out of spite or revenge. I exposed them because they were destroying other people and getting away with it. The women whose lives Beatrice had ruined deserve justice. The workers who had been injured due to safety violations, covered up by William, deserve justice. The small businesses they had crushed deserve justice. And yes, I deserve justice too. Not just for the heartbreak and humiliation, but for the way they tried to make me believe I was less valuable as a human being because I didn't come from money. The best part about my story isn't that I got revenge on people who hurt me. The best part is that I discovered who I really was underneath all their attempts to diminish me. I found strength I didn't know I had, intelligence I'd never been challenged to use, and a capacity for leadership that changed not just my life, but the lives of hundreds of other women. Gabriel tried to contact me a few more times over the years. Birthday cards, Christmas messages, occasional emails asking how I was doing. I never responded, not out of cruelty, but because that chapter of my life was closed. I had moved on to bigger and better things, and I wanted him to do the same. Last year, I heard he'd started a nonprofit organization helping formerly incarcerated people find employment. Maybe losing everything taught him something about compassion and justice that his privileged upbringing never could. I hope so, not for my sake, but for his own. These days, when young women come to my foundation, feeling broken and worthless because someone with money and power has tried to destroy them, I tell them my story, not to encourage revenge, but to show them that other people's opinions of your worth don't define your actual value. I tell them that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting everything. Not everything they had, but everything you deserve. Success, happiness, peace, and the knowledge that you rose above their attempts to keep you down. I tell them that people like the Wellington family count on us staying quiet, staying small, accepting their assessment of our place in the world. They count on us believing that we deserve less because we have less. But here's the truth they don't want us to know. We don't have less. We have different. And different can be more powerful than money, more influential than social status, and more lasting than inherited wealth. The little girl who grew up in her grandmother's house, learning to cook with love and determination, was never less valuable than the boy who grew up in a mansion built on lies and exploitation. It just took me a while to realize it. And now, every morning, when I wake up in my beautiful home, the one I bought and paid for with money I earned through my own talent and hard work, I remember my grandmother's words, "You got fire in you, baby girl. Use it." I used it. And honey, it lit up the whole world. And that's how the girl they tried to destroy became the woman who destroyed their legacy. Sometimes karma needs a little help. And honey, I was happy to be karma's assistant. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of justice and triumph, and tell me in the comments, do you think I went too far or not far enough? Remember, never let anyone make you feel small just because they think they're big. Keep your head up, and I'll see you in the next one.